Okay, well, we're back from London and other parts of Europe, maybe none the worse for wear. I had jet lag coming and going. I don't know what people say about not having it coming this way, but I'm recovering pretty good. Hope all of our people at the workshop are doing well, and haven't. I hope I didn't overwhelm and overly what's the right word, assault your sensibilities. Our intensives are pretty intense, and there's no question about it. And I'm certainly hoping that you guys are able to put to work that stuff that I tried to impress on you. And what I wanted to talk about today, by the way, is just that kind of content that we had that where I found I was making notes to myself at the end of days saying, "Oh, they don't get this." Now, not mean necessarily that all of them didn't, but that this concept needs to be expanded on or needs to be worked on. And of course, we go into a workshop like this with an idea of clarifying certain points and establishing certain behaviors. So, of course, I'm going to be reinforcing them in the course of things. But I'm just going to say, for the sake of this video, I'm going to just talk about some of these points for the sake of reinforcing to those guys who are in our workshop, and then talking to you all who might be trying to do this. Let me, before I do that, thank Adam C. and Lauren K. For your kind and continuing support. Keep it coming, folks, and everybody else out there. If you can do that, subscribing, sharing, liking, and donating whenever you get a chance, that's just hugely appreciated. All right, so let me just make a few of the points. By the way, in the course of conversation, I also found, in the course of the workshop, I also found myself able to read Delacroix's journals, finish William Morris Hunt's book. There's a couple of books that were just happened to be in the library of Ali, our gracious host. Thank you again, Ali and Maya, and blessings to the little fellow Cosmo. In any case, though, but what they did for us was just amazing. What they provided in terms of our daily care, and then a provision for the place, and every sort of little amazing thing that made it really flow nicely for us as a group. So, thank you to everybody. All right. As I said, I'm going to just talk about now about the points, some of the points that came up sort of repeatedly, things we needed to emphasize and work on. And I'm hoping I can read my panel. I don't, as you can see, I don't have my computer. It managed to survive the trip, and then when I got home, it wasn't. It decided to lose its screen, so I don't have. This isn't anywhere near as bright as it would otherwise be. This paper I'm working from, so handwritten. That's a problem. Can I even read my own writing? That sort of thing. But let's just make a bit of a list of the things I saw that needed work, and that, in any case, I would be working on with you all if you were in my presence. And so the first one was the idea of really, really working on the color. The idea of really putting time into the color, really bringing it, getting a note down, getting a second note down, and then getting the set of three notes down and getting them right to each other. That was a huge piece of what I was trying to convey and get as a result. I was trying to get a result. And it's so huge if you're going to be an impressionist that you can see in multiples. So that was a thing that really needed to work. One of the things that people I found were doing, you all, I should be talking to you guys who are there, I am. But the people were resorting to what I call sight size. So when they thought they had the color right, they would look over at nature and see if it looked right, instead of maintaining this idea of what the thing is interrelatedly. In the course of my reading, since I got home, by the way, somebody had provided me a copy of Degas by himself. And in this volume, Degas by himself, this one here, if you haven't seen it, if you don't have access to it, I recommend it. It's got a lot of stuff that you probably aren't going to be much interested in. A lot of the evidence of this tragic vision loss and suffering. But but I've always been entertained, and I've introduced you before what what he says about this guy Humbert. I'm just going to read it to you. He says, "Yeah, there are people. I'm sorry. There's a painter called Humbert who takes his students, who takes pupils. He tells them, you must get the color of the model, and he sets up the canvas right beside the model. To do a thing like that, and we did that, by the way, so I'm in that class, right? To do a thing like that is so stupid, it isn't even worth thinking about." He was silent for a while, and this is Halevi, I believe, recording this. He's a comment made to him. He was silent for a while, and then he added quickly, "What I mean is that everything in a picture is the interrelationships. Everything in a picture is the interrelationships. We paint the sun with the yolk of an egg. Go put your canvas alongside the sun." But I've said that to you all before, but that was a thing that I was really trying to bring home to our guys in the workshop, and that is, and I see that as a consistent difficulty, a thing that needs, no matter who you are, that you need to sort that out and figure out how to do it. But there's the kind of a way of seeing where you let yourself have two or three things in your eye at once. Maybe thinking mostly about correcting one of them, having seen it maybe as a backstrike, but you have all three of them in your eye at once, and you quiet yourself down enough to begin to see what those things are doing as a set, and all of a sudden you'll become aware. Suddenly there'll be an awareness that'll hit you, and that's a thing that I was very much emphasizing. It's better than just this to this and this to this repeatedly, this to this and this to this. It's better than that, though that's important. But the worst thing is just to look over there, and if you have this set of relationships right, that's all we need. We don't need to have this right in sight size. We don't have this matching over there. It will appear to be matching. It will be in some proximal range, but each of them being matched, each one of them being corrected by matching, won't deliver the results that Degas is talking about, and that we need to be simply true in color and color. And color, to be true in color, the only way we can truly be true in color is to be true relationally. So that's the great lesson. This big Boston school sort of conversation comes back over and over again. So let's see if I want to make sure that I cross off these points and don't start repeating them. So let's see. Okay. So that's the seeing in multiples question. Remember, I've talked to you a little bit about the idea of forbidden knowledge, and we're trying to get a truthful rendering of what's in front of us. And the truth is in the relationships, right? So the truth is in the relationships, not in the simple fact. But that's why, again, that forbidden knowledge, if you don't have that, I have a little segment printed out from a book, maybe by that title, Forbidden Knowledge, in which it talks about how you get to certainty about what you know. And that is by, this whole thing has everything to do with seeing how this works when you think of it with that, when you think of it with this, when you think with that. And then it gets to this point of how does it look when you're seeing the thing as a whole. It's very interesting that it would be in just the general cognitive sense, but it's valuable to us because we're trying to get, the truth in front of us in terms of the look of nature. So, was there any other point related to that? I apologize for doing this. My eyes just aren't that great, even with glasses and the lens here. I'm probably getting lens flare. Yeah, so that's good. So that's point one. Now, one of the other things I saw was that there was a tendency, and what one has in general is a tendency to want to put something down and believe in it. And what you want to do is put something down tentatively with the hope of it working out, but when new information comes in, be ready, knees bent, be ready to adjust, be ready to adjust. So there's this constant upgrading of any color note you put down. There's a constant upgrading by new information. And remember, the new information isn't just the information you have when you look at it this to this, or when you look at it as a whole, but it's also when you look at it side by side with the color immediately next to it. And Benson talks about that. So these are the kinds of things I was trying to bring emphasis to. And that was one of those things that, people don't want to, you don't want to pick a color and settle and then live there. It's not the same thing as anchoring. So we should discuss the anchoring portion of this thing, setting anchors. Because the setting of an anchor is, like, for example, I tried to get you to say, let's find out parameters of a picture. if you have a wide picture, you might want to decide what parts are going to just be off this far off the edge, and that, so how big is this? How big is this going to be in the frame? You can set those and fix them and keep them forever right through the end of the painting. Easier probably to do that than almost any other kind of anchoring, because the rest of the anchoring is kind of a search for an anchor. And that's hard. I think that's hard for a lot of us. But you put down something, you say, I'm going to believe in this. You can say it's the most rich red you can get of such and such a kind. You can't make it any better than that. Well, that may be the anchor for your leading chroma, right? You probably won't be able to find a way to improve on that if you're good at searching, if you're good at getting that. So that would be in the class of an anchor that you might be able to say, and let's call that fixed. Dark is dark and light is light. They're pretty fixable. You should be able to say, let this be my darkest dark. But sometimes you'll find out that you made the darkest dark way too inky, and now you have to bring color into it. And that might mean that your darkest dark is going to have to come up in value a little bit. So at that point, once you get the life in the color of the dark, or the life in the light, then you can say, now let's try to live within this range. So this tentativeness that's always searching for fixedness, right? And you keep trying to live, you keep wanting to live in this range that you set up. And that's very much the point, you're setting up a range to live in. So other people use different words for that word range. It's not coming to mind exactly, but it's in the class of rather parameters, the limits of this. We're only going to go this rich. We're only going to go this dark. And the rest of the stuff is going to have to land in between that, and et cetera. So that's a big deal about in the class of setting anchors. But it's a search. Keep remembering that the whole thing is a search. And yes, there will be, as you get more data and there'll be clarity, you'll start knowing you can live with that. But just in terms of color, that's one thing, values and color. The next part of it in the affirmation thing is establishing the effects, right, at points. And then there's this whole world of relational. So you're saying you're trying to find the most projective of these notes. Even Leonardo talks about what the most projectiveness is. So these are the kinds of things I found myself wanting to lean on with people in the workshop, and seeing progress. And by the way, I saw progress. It was constant progress. It was just right. It was amusing. Some guys would pick up in this area, some guys pick up in that area. All different ways of progressing, depending on what they've already got a bit of a feeling for. One of the things I brought a lot of emphasis to was staying on a point. You go over there to make this color better. Don't poke at it. Look at it to this, look at that, look at it. Make sure it's clearly better and is no longer the back straggler. And that would be true of for example, you're setting up your PowerPoints. You constantly you're bringing new data in, and you keep on saying, now what was I saying? Oh, so did I achieve it? Did I achieve it? Does it have that projectiveness? Okay. So whatever the point is, though, if you're improving a color, limit yourself to improving that color and stay in game until you do improve that color. Until it's when you're looking at the whole, when you're looking at the relationals, it is not the back straggler, minimally at least that much, so it's not the back straggler anymore of your general impression. Now, that was another thing, the back straggler idea of that. Are you only picking your back straggler based on what's least like when you're looking at the thing as a whole? So that was another thing that we revisited and reemphasized. You'll see that most typically people will go after something that they have a reason to go after, may want. A lot of that has to do with what one of my students yesterday told me. He said, he referred to himself as having some ambition to be ahead of where he is. So he kept seeing down the road instead of doing good here. He was seeing down the road. That's a very, very good point. So when you do have enough data out there, and you're always reviewing it. This is another point that I had to make. You're always reviewing it to see what the back straggler is. When you're looking at the whole, you're always reviewing it. Even when you're deciding what to do next, once your page has got a lot of data in it, there could already be things off. Let's not be plowing forward. Let's consolidate. Let's really make what we put down, let's bring it in to unity with what we have already. Right? So we're not getting out multiple points of dissension and wandering off in different directions. These are all points that come up constantly when you're teaching, and of course did in the setting of this workshop. I hope you all are remembering some of those things in a useful way. I was trying to get our guys in the workshop to journal. I've always recommended that. I was told to do that by Gamma when I first studied with him. And I found it hugely important for you to think through what you're doing, where you are, what the world around you is like. You could even sort out stuff, related to the guy you're studying with. You gain clarity by expressing thoughts, etc. So, so staying on a point, setting anchors. What else did I have? We did talk about trying to keep alive your color. I tried to get people to when you're painting, search for the color through the chroma. Try to make it. If you don't see if the color isn't glowing like it seems to be doing in nature, and by the way, if you don't notice that, how are you looking? So there's conversations about looking out of the sides of your eyes, looking at the thing as a big hole, so and not zooming to find out anything, but staying on the picture plane. This is just the conversation that keeps coming up and kept coming up. Um, so let's see. Yeah, there's one thing I didn't. Well, I'm going to leave it at that, actually. Just leave it at that. So let's see. What was the next point? Oh, yeah. So one thing I found people not consistent with is people would put down things and they'd look like objects really fast. But in the meantime, the points that they were, the major points that we're setting up, top and bottom and things like that made up shapes. Like, for example, top and bottom plus one of these widths that's sitting on the page creates an ovoid, what Amy Moore calls an ovoid, which is just simply a shape, right? Is a shape that has two dimensions, length, but it also has a tilt. And I found that people are very much more inclined to question whether the shape of the pot is right and not whether the shape of the ovoid is right. And so that's a thing that one wants to figure out how to work into your system. What the heck is an ovoid and how important is it? Is there such a thing as a shape that isn't the shape of an object? So that was a fairly good one, and we had meaty conversations and pointings too of at things like that. But be very good at that. It's the same, the Sargent thing, the point angle thing. It's so important when you're doing the point angle thing that you're aware of the implied box. This angle goes to this angle. Well, there's an implied plumb, and therefore a box, even just on an angle. But just be aware of whether the one you've put down would set up that same box, or would it set up a narrower box, that angle to point if you dropped plumb or raised a vertical? Would that be the same width box as the one you're seeing in nature? And again, that we got back to that whole idea of, are you conceptualizing? Do you have an idea of the proportion fixed in your mind and eye? Do you have an idea of anything? Of the relationship, though. It was about re-emphasizing the idea that we have to see things relationally, but relational seeing implies that when you see this to this, there is a concept. There's interplay, and therefore a concept, right? And the concept isn't, and again, we had this discussion about not so much what it is what it's doing, right? So what is this doing in relation to that, So one of the things when you make a dark meet a light, is it glowing like it should in relation to the other one? It can be glowing by being, more, it should be more light, or the other one should be more dark, or one of them should be more chromatic. But this sense of glow, what's a doing thing? So that was another point of conversation, the idea of doing over just what it is, right? It's what it's doing, what's doing to other things in relation to other things. Yeah, but so there's that point angle thing over. So that's obviously a good discussion. One of the other interesting discussions was the idea of where to generalize. For example, we know that I was emphasizing trying to get your canvas covered, and I wasn't insisting on pushing on it, but how to try to get your canvas covered in an hour. I mean, sorry, in 2 hours. And it implies a lot of sort of what you might call poor drawing, or it implies a way of handling areas without drawing. In other words, with no intention to actually be doing the drawing of these little things that are landing in there. And so we had some good discussions about how to generalize. And it's one that's an ongoing one. I can't say I think I brought that one home precisely adequately enough, but guys were picking up on it. But the idea is that's what's called the compression of values. If you can see by darkening down your eyes, you can see what are the major players. And I say to you then, that tells you what not to draw. In other words, that tells you which areas are going to be generally masked out. And what I try to do when we mass out those generalized areas, because we want to get to the end of a start, be able to see what the thing is essentially, as a big impression. What I try to get people to do though is to chase the color. Make sure you don't leave the color out. Just don't chase it as every little shape. But if there's a color movement in that, have it. Don't let it be some dumb color that looks wrong. We don't do anything that looks wrong generally. We just are drawing things. You might say we're not drawing some things yet, but the general area has a general look by value and by color of being right. So that's the generalizing. But what you find if you're working our way, and what I tried to bring home was that we need very specific points, well articulated. You might say to generalize from. So we need points. We need, so you really want to figure out what a painting looks like in your own work, in your own hand. What it would look like, this model of coming out of a fog, what it would look like. So I keep saying that it has this thing like the push me, pull you. It has this very articulate look of nature in these highly projective parts. And it has this standing back, standing down of the parts that are less articulate. And there's a phase where you just you're gonna have to learn how to do that. And but it's kind of a matter of when. So I keep saying if you darken down your eyes, you can see what not to draw. Well, you could, as it goes by, and those things, you've set those up really beautifully and your color scheme is there, then you can start opening your eyes and you'll say, now what to draw? And you'll stay in a constant relationship to the power guys. You'll have those things established. And so the next level of guys will be very aware of who they can't get past, who they have to stay below, would be a good way of saying it. So that was a lot of what we talked about. But the idea of articulating at the joint. So at the end there, I was seeing that some people were saying, "Oh, you mean really draw exactly what that looks like at that little point of that pot? Remember that, Jack? Right around that edge. Yeah, not hack at it and poke at it, but that part is the bottom or top. Articulate, and it's a lead fact. Articulate it. Go ahead and draw it with its edge, its shape, and the contrast. Make it really good in the midst of a lot of things being generalized. And by doing that, you actually have you have a very strong base. But this is one of those ones I'm going to suggest to you. Trust me on this. Give this a shot. Really give it your very best shot. And that's what I was leaning on, trying to get people to do. Really, really articulate well what we are drawing, and figure out some way to keep the other guys out of the room for a while. You see what I mean? All right. Now, one of the other things I did see us people doing, and this is dedicated to everybody, and that is the idea of knowing versus seeing. You got to keep remembering, I try to emphasize, you got to keep remembering that we think we know things, but that means you're working behind your eyes. That knowledge, yesterday's knowledge is not what we do. What I tried to get people to do was keep their eyes out here in front of you, and all you're thinking related to this, to this, to this, to this, all out here on this picture plane, right? Not something out of your head, and not something zoomed in either, by the way. It's a very funny thing to say that, isn't it? But you're living in this middle zone. You're living on the picture plane. So if you can, if you can keep that going in your mind, that we're not looking in our heads to see what we know, we're looking at what we see in front of us and what it does to each other, you're going to be in the impressionist mind. You're going to be in the big-eyed mindset. You know what I mean? Oh, he's just an eye, but what an eye, right? All right. So let's see. I know. Yeah. So one of the points, noticing, I was saying, making a point of people would notice that something was off, and they would resort to the other way they had it working. Something was off, say a pot is a little bit the wrong shape, and they would go back to their object making and try to correct the pot instead of staying in visual order and just correcting the data. Now that may be a difficult one for you to hear without somebody pointing at things with you, and I don't have images today because my computer's down. That's why you're getting this without any paperwork in front of you. I suppose that's a mercy some days, although pictures are not, we need pictures. But but that's the same as with color. You hit some color notes and you find the time you got these three color notes and they don't quite look right, you make them righter to each other as the set. You don't go looking over it at the object next to you and try to see if one of these colors can be matched better to nature. That isn't your job anymore. Your job is actually this other job of this to this to this to this, right? So if you can avoid resorting to object drawing, doesn't mean you don't have to articulate form and things like that. By the way, that makes me think of, we finally did wind up in this little world of, not finally, we're within the second week, I guess, we're working on heads and portrait heads as part of this. In the longer ones in the past, we've gone outside and done a little more stuff. And by the way, I'm thinking of reducing. The next time I do this, probably won't do it 6 days. I think I was really exhausting everybody. Maybe make it just 5 days. I think we sort of did 5 days. We were trying to do a day in there that was a studio day. No, it was still 6 days because we worked Saturdays. Yeah. Anyway, but I'm having second thoughts for all you guys who were there. Any feedback is very welcome. In fact, any feedback from you guys would be seriously welcome. I forgot to even think about having a form or some paper feedback, but I would love to have any feedback, something I can do better, something that some area in which I may have, yeah, sort of let you down or whatever. I'd love to know how to be more of a benefit to anybody who comes to these things. I can't do them cheaply. I wish I could, and so I feel bad if the information isn't coming through. I know a lot of you were looking for me to push more, but I find in these things that you can't push more. You really have to say how important the base is of good color relationships, of good angle, proportion angle, and joint and roller. All this work is how important it is to be good at it, and that's what I was really trying to do for you all. I was trying to establish the parts you got to get good at, and this parts you got to get good at and be good at in the beginning of every single painting if you're doing our kind of work. So that would be explain that, and I'm saying that, but I'm getting back to this idea of the idea of what we're painting a head as an egg. And it gets back to that quote. I don't know if I shared that with you. I think I might have it here. If I do have it, I will. Oh yeah, I do. This is Delacroix talking. The halftone gives a frankly round modeling as a preparation, and then bold touches of light and dark are laid on. That's really a key model, but we're talking about it as preparation. So what we're doing is, remember that concept of bunker, keep on preparing the canvas until you come in and find it finished. But this preparation is, the preparation is, so when you do a head, you're doing it, you could paint it as a flat note in theory, but it will look wrong. So as soon as you do, so we paint it as an oval rather, not an ellipse, whatever you want to say, as a round thing, an egg. But what we're doing is we're working from the halftones. So what the halftones means is the general impression of the big color notes. So having these major areas right to each other, it was a big thing to get everybody on page with trying to really do beautiful work with the 4 and 5 big color values. And everybody was beginning to really bring it. It was really, to me, it was extremely exciting. I don't know. I hope it was to you guys, not frustrating. That we didn't get further, I mean. But the further is yet to come, right? So let's see leave it at that. But and then one last thing I think I'll throw in there. That is, I noticed that people didn't automatically prioritize by the majors, and that sort of come right out of that other idea there, working from the majors, and it does mean from the greater shapes, the most powerful effects, from the leading effects. There's the major. My world of major doesn't necessarily mean big, but the great proportions, not every little subdivision, and thinking in terms of the most useful. There's things that have major usefulness and then that are minor in their usefulness. So categories like that, the idea of figuring out what's significant, and what's significant for the drawing forth of the truth of this impression, the beauty of this impression. So, well, that gives you some idea of the stuff I was digging in anyway. I'd love to do it show you some pictures from some of the guys, and I did that with the black and whites. I do recommend you all experiment with that, just exploring how to get quality light effects in just black and white before you even think about what color does, how much of a factor value is, and the edge plus value also. That really hugely comes through and came through, I think, to everybody in the workshop probably. But so the brown paper studies the black and whites, and then the step by step powering up the color and really studying color, respecting the color, getting the life in the color and the relationships of the life, the chroma, the red, yellow, blue, and searching through the red, yellow, blue to find the actual note. Um, I did show people what I mean by working from the lights instead of from the darks, but I really don't totally. I just happen to put the lights on first because I like the fact there's white canvas. And I want to see these colored whites to the degree that it's white. I'd like to know exactly how it relates to true white. So I put those notes down first. And then I immediately get around and spot around the darkest dark and all the other things, the most chromatic notes. I hope everybody picked up on those sorts of things. But in the meantime, I really do thank you all for having been there. And all of you for having been here through 453 of these things. Some of you I've probably watched every single one of them. And I was really excited by seeing how much knowledge these people brought in of the knowledge of the direction of what I'm teaching. I'm teaching. I hate to use that word in some ways, but but yeah, you guys are all trying to figure out painting, and what you came in with blew my mind actually. And all of you did have what I was hoping for, some level of basic drawing. You had some, weren't unconfident. I think some of what I was doing with you was shaking your confidence in some of that you had in some ways, but I hope we didn't. I hope we emphasized enough the value of relying on your don't on some of the things you already know that aren't that again would say that they aren't wrong. Just don't assume everything. So when you come into a room, sometimes I think you assume too many things. You just have to drop. Well, you do have to kind of drop everything. But as time goes by, you'll be able to see that. Oh, that's what I've always done, and you'll reincorporate that into your back in and let it continue to be part of something you did instinctively, a part of what you're doing, that thing you did instinctively. So anyway, yeah, it was really looking back. It was actually more, being in London. I mean, almost didn't mean much to me, but looking back, it means a lot to me to having been there. And I really want to thank again Ollie and Maya and Whitaker and Alicia, both with families of which Mr. Producer, that is, both of which families have had little like 11-month-old kids on their arms. It was a beautiful thing. And again, thank you again to our contributors for today, Adam C. and oh, Lauren K. Yes, for those kind contributions. So if you all would, the more the better in that direction. Keep your comments coming. I haven't had a chance to look at any comments in the last month and a half, so I hope that hasn't discouraged everybody totally. And I guess I'll be talking to Mr. Producer about having a live one again one of these days soon. But in the meantime, I hope that was a good refresher for you guys who were there at the workshop, and for those who weren't, maybe a nice review of the sort of way of thinking that surrounds what we do and what you might have missed. All right. All right. I think I'll let it go at that. And I hope you have a very, very nice painting week and do well. And we'll see you next time.